The papers felt impossibly light in my hands, but the weight of what they represented was crushing. My own son and his wife were smiling at me like I was too old, too forgetful, too frail to manage anything anymore. I had built Matthews and Associates from nothing, turned it into a multi-million-dollar empire after my husband died, and now, apparently, I was too senile to keep it. Marcus and Sarah were gleeful, certain they were about to inherit a fortune. What they didn't know was that the fortune came with a trap. I signed the transfer documents without reading a word, and their eyes sparkled with greed. Little did they know, what they inherited was a financial nightmare that would consume them both. It had started innocently enough, or at least I had thought it would. Sunday dinners with my son Marcus and his wife Sarah were usually pleasant, albeit tense at times. But when I arrived that afternoon, I walked straight into an ambush. Marcus barely let me sit down before he began. "Mom, we need to talk." Sarah was already rifling through a manila folder, her nails tapping against the polished mahogany table. She explained that my doctor had recommended I step back from the business, that the stress wasn't healthy. The papers on the table would transfer full ownership of Matthews and Associates to them. "We'll handle everything," she said, her voice saccharine with false concern. "You just relax and enjoy retirement." The irony was not lost on me. The woman who had made her living with words now threatened me with legal consequences if I refused. A competency hearing, she called it. My son, trained in law yet silent, watched as his wife maneuvered. Marcus and Sarah had painted me as incapable, but all I saw was opportunity. I picked up the pen and signed. Their joy was palpable. Sarah clapped her hands like a child on Christmas morning. Marcus seemed uncertain, expecting tears, protests, some display of resistance. But instead I smiled. "Congratulations," I said, standing and smoothing my skirt. "You're now the proud owners of Matthews and Associates. I hope you're ready for everything that comes with it." The shock on their faces was priceless. I left them with the papers and the company they thought would make them wealthy. That night, I enjoyed a quiet coffee as the sunrise painted my garden golden, savoring the thought of their impending panic. By morning, Marcus and Sarah discovered the IRS had questions about the company's taxes, and there was a lawsuit from Patterson Industries over a failed consulting project worth millions. The very problems I had been handling for months were now theirs to contend with, and they were woefully unprepared. I had anticipated every question before it was asked. Marcus's voice trembled over the phone, panic rising as he realized the full scope of the inherited liabilities. Legal fees alone would run about $400,000, and their liquid assets barely approached $100,000. They had coveted the company for its profits, blind to its ongoing obligations. I had quietly prepared for this, moving crucial funds into protected accounts months earlier, while leaving them exposed to the full weight of responsibility. When Sarah shrieked about fraud, I reminded them, politely, that the documents they had forced me to sign included full disclosure of all known liabilities. They hadn't done their due diligence. The icing on the cake came when I offered the employees a way forward. 7 had already agreed to join my new company, EM Advisors, starting the following Monday. The remaining 5 found positions with competitors. Sarah protested, calling it illegal, but the truth was simple. I no longer owned Matthews and Associates, and they couldn't legally prevent employees from seeking other opportunities. Meanwhile, the clients, people who had worked with me personally for years, were coming with the employees. Matthews and Associates was now a hollow shell, full of debt and litigation, while EM Advisors thrived from the first day. Marcus and Sarah were forced to confront the consequences of their choices. They had stolen a company they did not understand, hoping to take advantage of my supposed senility. The irony was complete. They had sought power by exploiting weakness, only to discover that their supposed victim had anticipated every move. As their panic unfolded, I sipped my coffee and watched, calm and collected. They had overplayed their hand, and I had been patient, calculating, and ready for the moment they fell. I knew the next steps involved Patterson Industries. Resolving the lawsuit would require tact, negotiation, and expertise. I called Robert Patterson directly, offering a resolution that benefited both parties while simultaneously exposing Marcus and Sarah's lack of preparation. They could either pursue a legal judgment against a company doomed by inexperience or accept my professional consulting offer through EM Advisors to recover and grow. It was a choice grounded in pragmatism, and Robert took it. Within days, the lawsuit was withdrawn, clients were happy, employees were employed, and my new company was thriving. Marcus, broken and exhausted, finally approached me. He confessed everything: the manipulation, the coercion, the months of planning with Sarah. For the first time, I saw humility in him, a glimmer of the boy he used to be. I offered him a job in EM Advisors, not as a gift, but as an opportunity to rebuild and earn his place. Sarah, meanwhile, was on the run, but her hubris would eventually betray her. In the calm after the storm, I reflected on the months of planning, the careful orchestration of each move. The company I had built, the life I had created, had been threatened by those I trusted most. Yet, through patience, strategy, and foresight, I had regained everything and more. Revenge had its satisfaction, but the real victory was preserving integrity, ensuring loyalty, and proving strength in the face of betrayal. I had no idea that a simple Sunday dinner would become a trap. My daughter-in-law, Sarah, smiled as she handed me a manila folder, calling me too senile to manage Matthews and Associates, the company I had built from the ground up after my husband's death 15 years earlier. My son Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his seat, muttering something about it being for my own good. According to them, I'd been forgetting appointments and mismanaging the business, a claim that was both absurd and infuriating. The papers were transfer documents that would hand the company over to them, and Sarah's voice dripped with fake concern, citing a letter from my doctor supposedly confirming my mental decline. I picked up the pen, smiling inwardly at their eagerness, and signed without reading a single word. Their faces lit up with triumph, believing they were inheriting a golden empire, unaware that the inheritance came with a carefully orchestrated nightmare. I left the dinner, maintaining a calm smile while my mind raced. Matthews and Associates was indeed facing challenges: an IRS audit back to 2019, litigation from Patterson Industries for nearly $3 million, and complex tax and contract issues that would require months of legal expertise to resolve. They had demanded my company, painting me as incompetent, and now they would discover the brutal reality of what they had taken. My son called the next morning in panic, pleading for help, but I responded only with pointed reminders of how they had deemed me unfit to run the company. The irony was delicious. Marcus and Sarah had been so eager to seize my business that they never did their due diligence. They had overlooked liabilities I had quietly been managing for months, preparing for this very scenario. Their greed blinded them, and I intended to let it consume them. Over the next few days, their reality collapsed under the weight of debts and legal complications. Matthews and Associates had about $100,000 in accessible funds, nowhere near enough to cover immediate payroll, let alone legal fees. Employees were anxious, clients were unsettled, and Marcus and Sarah were already showing signs of unraveling. I, on the other hand, had a plan. While they had inherited chaos, I had been quietly laying the groundwork for my next move. I had begun transferring key employees into my new consulting firm, EM Advisors, positioning myself to take not just the talent, but the clients as well. 7 loyal employees were eager to join me immediately, and the rest found opportunities elsewhere. The clients, who had trusted me for years, would follow the expertise, not the company name, and they understood the value of working with someone who had guided their growth for over a decade. I wasn't stealing from them. I was simply providing stability that Matthews and Associates, now under inexperienced hands, could no longer offer. By the following Tuesday, I received a certified letter from Patterson Industries. They demanded immediate payment of $2,700,000 for breach of contract, with 30 days to respond or face collection proceedings. Marcus's voice trembled when he called, finally realizing that the empire he thought he had inherited was sinking fast. I calmly explained that the lawsuit was legitimate but resolvable, though costly. Legal fees alone would run approximately $400,000, assuming a favorable outcome, and operational cash was tied up. Marcus and Sarah had naively believed ownership was a gift, unaware that responsibility was inseparable from power. I reminded them of paragraph 7, subsection C, in the transfer documents, which disclosed liabilities they had ignored. The clause was ironclad, and every critical detail had been included, though it was hidden in legal language that they never bothered to read. As panic set in, my son's calls grew frantic. Sarah shrieked in the background, demanding to know why I had withheld information. I simply replied that they had chosen to see me as mentally incompetent, and by their own logic, I couldn't have been trusted to manage the company or to warn them of impending disaster. Their ignorance had become their greatest enemy. The IRS audit, pending litigation, and operational shortfalls, all the challenges I had spent years navigating, were now theirs. They had asked for this, and they would have to learn the hard way. Meanwhile, my new firm, EM Advisors, was growing rapidly. Employees were motivated, clients were eager, and every decision reinforced the stability and competence I had honed over decades. Marcus and Sarah's overconfidence had been their downfall. By underestimating me and dismissing my abilities, they had effectively handed me the tools to rebuild, unburdened by the family drama that had long distracted me from innovation. I made a few calls to ensure my new company had contracts ready to absorb the work Matthews and Associates could no longer manage, solidifying my advantage before they even realized the full extent of their predicament. By the next morning, Marcus called again, desperation evident in every word. He admitted that he and Sarah could not handle the crisis alone and pleaded for guidance. I reminded him of the irony. Just yesterday, they had claimed I was too confused to manage anything, and now they were dependent on my expertise. I offered him no favors, no shortcuts, only the truth. They had made their choices, and now they had to live with them. Their inherited empire was crumbling because they had ignored the responsibilities that came with it. My satisfaction was tempered with a sense of responsibility. The employees, loyal and hardworking, would not suffer because of their folly. I had ensured that every move I made preserved the people who truly mattered, those who had built and sustained the business alongside me. By midweek, the consequences of their mismanagement were undeniable. Matthews and Associates had already lost two key clients who had grown impatient with delays and disorganization. Rumors of missed deadlines and unpaid vendors spread quickly, further eroding confidence in the company. Marcus and Sarah were scrambling to patch the holes, but it was like trying to bail water out of a sinking ship with a thimble. Meanwhile, EM Advisors was thriving. My team was fully integrated, our systems efficient, and our clients reassured. Every misstep they made seemed to feed our momentum, as if chaos itself were funneling energy into our success. I received a call from Patterson Industries' legal team. Surprisingly, they were open to negotiation. They had seen the operational collapse firsthand and were more interested in ensuring their contract obligations were met than pursuing a prolonged battle. I proposed a structured payment plan, clearly delineating milestones and protections, ensuring Patterson felt secure while not overextending my new company. It was a calculated move, stability, trust, and foresight, qualities that Matthews and Associates had failed to demonstrate. By Friday, the tension at Matthews and Associates had reached a boiling point. Employees were leaving in droves, citing instability and mismanagement. Marcus called me one last time, pleading for advice on retaining anyone at all. I listened patiently and offered strategic guidance, but with a firm caveat: this was the result of their own choices. I would not rebuild their empire for them, but I could ensure that those willing to take responsibility for their work had a path forward. By the end of the week, EM Advisors had doubled its client roster. My foresight, careful planning, and years of experience had not only preserved my career, but elevated it to new heights. Marcus and Sarah had inherited a name, but they lacked the vision and diligence to sustain it. In the silence of my office, I allowed myself a small smile. The lesson had been learned painfully but effectively. The weekend brought unexpected clarity. Marcus, exhausted and defeated, finally reached out not as a son, but as a man seeking accountability. He confessed the full extent of their actions, the premeditated plan Sarah had orchestrated, the threats, the lies, and his own complicity. He detailed how she had manipulated him, isolated him from anyone who could advise him, and convinced him that stealing my company was an act of love and protection. Hearing this, I felt a mixture of relief and sorrow, relief that the truth was finally out, sorrow for the son I had raised who had been so easily manipulated. Monday morning, I prepared for the next phase. I had instructed my attorney to gather all documentation, contracts, and communications that proved the premeditation and manipulation. With evidence in hand, the authorities were able to issue warrants for both Marcus and Sarah's arrest. But Sarah, as I expected, had already disappeared. Interpol was involved, and Canadian and European authorities were on high alert. Her movements were meticulous, fueled by desperation and greed, but even the most careful planning can unravel with a single oversight. While the investigation unfolded, I focused on my new company. EM Advisors was flourishing beyond my expectations. Employees who had followed me from Matthews and Associates were productive and motivated. Our clients were impressed by the seamless transition and continuity of service. What they didn't know, or perhaps what they chose not to notice, was the quiet satisfaction I derived from seeing my old company's turmoil play out in real time. Every mismanaged payroll, every delayed contract, every panicked phone call from Marcus and Sarah reinforced the lesson I had been demonstrating. Experience, foresight, and integrity cannot be replicated overnight. By midweek, the breakthrough came. Through a careful combination of surveillance and financial tracking, authorities located Sarah in Switzerland. She had been trying to access money hidden in offshore accounts when the alerts went off. Local authorities detained her, and arrangements for extradition to the United States began immediately. The irony was almost poetic. Her own greed, the very force that had driven her manipulation and betrayal, had been her undoing. With Sarah secured and Marcus willing to cooperate, the path to justice was clear. He provided detailed testimony about every aspect of the plan: the threats, the hidden accounts, the manipulations of legal and medical documents, and the repeated efforts to undermine my credibility. The authorities were impressed by his candor and remorse, and agreements were made to reduce his sentencing in exchange for full cooperation. It was a stark contrast to Sarah, whose stubbornness and refusal to accept responsibility guaranteed the maximum penalties. Back in my office, I reflected on the past months. The scheme that had threatened to dismantle everything I had built instead became a crucible, forging a stronger, more resilient business and a clearer understanding of the people around me. EM Advisors was not just a new company, it was a testament to my experience, my patience, and my strategic thinking. I had turned betrayal into opportunity, chaos into order, and deceit into justice. As the court proceedings began, the full scope of Sarah's and Marcus's actions became public. The media, which had once painted me as the villain in my own story, greedy, manipulative, and ruthless, now shifted narratives. Articles detailed Sarah's elaborate schemes, her psychological manipulation of Marcus, and the financial chaos she had left in her wake. Interviews with experts emphasized the complexity of the situation and my measured legal approach to reclaiming what was mine. I didn't seek the spotlight, but the truth has a way of finding it. During the trial, Sarah's arrogance remained palpable. She continued to insist that she had acted out of love, protection, and loyalty, attempting to frame her betrayal as noble. But the evidence was overwhelming. Emails, recordings, and detailed financial records painted a picture of calculated deceit. Witnesses, including former colleagues who had fallen prey to her charm, testified about her manipulative tactics. Marcus, despite his initial complicity, delivered his testimony with remorse and humility, emphasizing his manipulation and his recognition of my guidance and mentorship over the years. The jury deliberated for only 3 days. The verdict was decisive. Sarah was convicted on multiple counts of fraud, extortion, and conspiracy, and was sentenced to a significant prison term. Marcus, having fully cooperated, received a reduced sentence with probation and mandatory counseling. The judgment was not only a legal victory, but a moral vindication, a confirmation that integrity, patience, and strategic thinking ultimately prevail over deception and malice. In the weeks following the trial, EM Advisors grew steadily. Clients appreciated the stability, professionalism, and ethical foundation that my company represented, contrasting sharply with the chaos and instability Sarah had left behind. I also implemented rigorous internal protocols, ensuring that no single individual could gain unilateral control or manipulate critical systems. The lessons of betrayal were costly, but they became invaluable safeguards for the future. On a personal level, the experience reshaped my relationships. I became more discerning, not cynical, about trust. I repaired bonds with colleagues and friends who had been caught in the fallout, and I extended guidance to others in the industry who faced similar threats. Marcus, too, began rebuilding his life, working under supervision in roles that emphasized accountability and ethical decision-making. Our relationship, though strained, had moved toward a fragile understanding, acknowledgement of past mistakes, and a commitment to more responsible behavior. In the end, the ordeal had forged something stronger than revenge. It had created clarity, resilience, and a renewed sense of purpose. EM Advisors was no longer merely a company. It was a symbol of endurance, a testament to the principle that true leadership is measured not by the absence of betrayal, but by the capacity to rise above it. Months later, life settled into a rhythm that felt almost normal, yet carried the weight of lessons hard-earned. EM Advisors now employed 15 dedicated consultants, many of whom had been loyal to Matthews and Associates before the betrayal. Their expertise and commitment made the transition seamless, and clients quickly recognized that they were working with the same capable hands they had trusted for years. The company thrived, and more importantly, it was free from the shadow of deception that had once loomed over Matthews and Associates. Marcus embraced his role fully, no longer the passive bystander to his wife's schemes. He worked diligently, often staying late, meticulously reviewing contracts and ensuring compliance. He attended therapy regularly, confronting the ways Sarah had manipulated him and learning to rebuild his moral compass. I watched him grow into a man capable of independent judgment, capable of protecting himself and the people around him. The journey from betrayal to redemption had been painful, but it had reshaped him into someone I could respect again, not as a son, but as a colleague and professional. Sarah's capture in Switzerland had been the final chapter in her audacious spree of manipulation. Her attempts to access hidden funds and establish a new identity only ensured that she would be extradited and face the consequences of her actions. With every legal barrier she tried to exploit, she revealed more of her greed, arrogance, and lack of foresight. Justice, slow as it sometimes is, had found her. In the courtroom, her once imposing confidence crumbled. The sentence, 15 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole for 7 years, was a stark reminder that calculated cruelty carries a steep price. Even behind bars, she would have plenty of time to reflect on the destruction her ambition had wrought. For me, the victory was not only professional but profoundly personal. I had preserved my company, reclaimed my reputation, and more importantly, safeguarded the people who relied on me: the employees, the clients, and eventually, Marcus. The pain of betrayal remained, but it was tempered by the clarity that comes from knowing you acted with integrity and foresight. I had been underestimated, called senile, and threatened with legal maneuvering meant to strip me of everything. Instead, I had turned the tables, not with anger, but with strategy, patience, and a steadfast adherence to truth. Reflecting on the ordeal, I realized that life's most challenging moments often carry hidden gifts. The betrayal by my own family had forced me to anticipate threats, strengthen my operations, and refine my judgment. It had shown me who truly supported me and who sought advantage at my expense. And, in a way I hadn't anticipated, it had given me a second chance with Marcus, a chance to guide him back toward honesty, accountability, and genuine responsibility. The office buzzed with energy as I walked through, greeting employees who were fully engaged and appreciated. The sun streamed through the windows, glinting off polished surfaces, reflecting not only light, but the renewed spirit of a company rebuilt on trust, experience, and careful planning. I paused for a moment, taking in the scene: people working together, problem solving, and innovating. It was a tangible proof that adversity, when met with patience and intelligence, can be transformed into growth and opportunity. In the quiet of my office later, I reflected on the ultimate lesson. The best revenge isn't always about punishing those who wronged you. It's about reclaiming your life, building something better, and demonstrating through action that deceit, greed, and manipulation are no match for clarity, skill, and resilience. By living well and creating a legacy rooted in honesty and competence, I had ensured that the consequences of others' malice were felt where they belonged, on those who had sought to harm me, while preserving the life I had spent decades building. For anyone watching this, remember this: people will test you, underestimate you, and sometimes betray you in ways that feel unimaginable, but your response defines you more than their actions ever could. Stand firm, plan wisely, and never allow deceit to dictate your life. Strength, patience, and integrity are powerful allies, and sometimes the greatest victories come not from confrontation, but from mastering the game while others play recklessly.